Chapter 13, Omen of Annihilation. 1. Ah, the sweet taste of victory. After Karnak's stellar performance in the trial by combat, House Zestrad now owns a copper mine, and Karnak himself is the new baron. Naturally, this called for a celebratory feast, because clearly nothing says, "I'm now in charge," quite like a good old slaughter of oxen and pigs. Picture this: roasted meat, alcohol flowing like a river, and the new Lord Karnak practically glowing with joy. Enter Barros, his ever-loyal attendant, whose enthusiasm for the feast could rival a kid in a candy store. Barros! Yes, young master. It's beef. There's also pork. Not sausages, but freshly butchered pork. Look at how juicy it is. It even has sauce. Tears of joy might as well have been streaming down their faces as they devoured the meal. The common folk, used to their annual meat fest being a rare luxury, watched in bewilderment. Is there any need to be that happy? Of course, beef is a rare treat, but still. Why are they acting as if they haven't had any in decades? The locals were scratching their heads, unable to grasp why their noble lord and his sidekick were reacting as if they'd never seen a steak before. Apparently, for the newly crowned baron, a decent meal was a revelation akin to finding a treasure chest. Just how grueling must his training have been for him to find such joy in something so simple? It must have been brutal. He did risk his life for us. Karnak was blissfully unaware of the spectacle he was creating. He was too busy savoring his meal to notice the crowd's amused gazes. Ah, delicious. Why is everyone staring at me? Maybe we're eating too much? We might get indigestion if we eat any more. I should be careful. This body is very precious. Everything was coming up roses for Karnak. A new title, newfound respect, and all the beef and pork he could dream of. He had achieved everything he had set out to do, and now it was time to bask in the glory. 3 months later, at the Zestrad Mansion's training ground, knights were witnessing a sparring match between a mid-30s knight and a spry young lad who was barely 20. "Watch out!" the knight bellowed, swinging his sword with a dramatic flair. "Yes, sir," the young man replied, blocking the attack with the grace of a ballet dancer and then launching a counterattack. Their swords clanged together like a symphony of metal. Barros, the young man, was proving to be quite the prodigy, much to the amazement of Sir Valton, who was wiping sweat from his brow. "Barros, to think you had such talent." Knights who had once laughed off Barros's ambition were now impressed. His skill was so outstanding, it was like watching an underdog story unfold before their eyes. Sir Taurus, another seasoned knight, couldn't resist praising Barros while maintaining his stern demeanor. Don't let it go to your head. It's not uncommon for gifted warriors to meet an untimely end due to inexperience. Barros, though, was still hiding his true capabilities. If he fought seriously, even 5 of these knights wouldn't stand a chance. But it was all in good fun. No need to make the others feel bad. The knights chatted about Barros's past delinquent activities, which were nothing more than typical teenage mischief: drinking, gambling, and the occasional brawl. No real harm done, just a bit of youthful rebellion. Sir Taurus reminisced about the days gone by. It's truly heartening for both you and the young master to become so responsible. The knights admired Karnak's transformation from a so-called good-for-nothing to a respectable baron. They noted how his reaction to a sip of alcohol was akin to witnessing a miracle. He's certainly been controlling himself, drinking lightly only in accompaniment with a meal. And thanks to that, the young master, the Lord, has been looking much healthier these days. Barros couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Karnak was now taking care of his body like it was a rare antique. After all, he'd spent decades as a corpse and wasn't about to mess things up now. Health was the new obsession. Meanwhile, Karnak was holed up in his study, not for the reasons the knights imagined, but for something far more intriguing. Instead of adventures or treasure hunts, he was perfecting his chaos power. In the quiet of the night, Karnak practiced drawing energy from the world around him. The process was less about necromancy and more about refining a new form of magic. His chaos power was the result of all his efforts, a little flame that didn't quite have the same dark aura as necromancy. Barros observed with curiosity. "Huh? It doesn't have that characteristic feel of necromancy," Karnak explained. "It may have originated from necromancy, but it is no longer necromancy. In this world, once you choose a path, be it necromancy, battle aura, or magic, there's no turning back. Each path irrevocably alters one's being. Karnak was determined not to tread the path of necromancy again, knowing all too well where it led. "So I've developed something new," Karnak declared, proudly displaying the flame. "I call it chaos power." And so, Karnak continued his journey, not as a necromancer, but as a pioneer of a new magical force, all while savoring every moment of his richly rewarding life. Late one night, in the spacious study on the second floor of Zestrad Mansion, Karnak sat in deep meditation. Moonlight filtered through the window, bathing him in its soft glow. Phew! He inhaled deeply, focusing his mind as he drew in the surrounding energy. The darkness of the night, the negative energy of the moon, the faint traces of corrupt energy, all of it converged upon him before being refined. After a while, Karnak opened his eyes. Good, that should be enough. He lifted a finger and a small flame ignited at its tip. Barros, observing from the sidelines, tilted his head in curiosity. Huh? It doesn't have that characteristic feel of necromancy. The aura of death that accompanied necromancy was unsettling to all living beings, even ordinary humans. Clerics were particularly sensitive to it, but the flame Karnak had conjured emanated no such aura. It appeared to be ordinary magic, and it's red. It looks just like a normal fire. As it should. Karnak nodded. It may have originated from necromancy, but it is no longer necromancy. Necromancy held no appeal for him now. He knew all too well the path it would lead him down. However, it was too late for him to start anew as a knight, a mage, or a cleric. Once you embark on the path of necromancy, there's no turning back. I know, it's the same for the other paths. There were 4 ways to transcend human limitations in this world. The battle aura of knights, who wielded life energy. The mana of mages, who wielded nature energy. The holy power of clerics, who followed the light and providence. And finally, necromancy, also known as dark magic, which had the authority to commandeer the power of death and darkness. What these paths shared was the ability to accumulate the world's energy within oneself and transform it into power. This process irrevocably altered the practitioner's soul and body, attuning them to their chosen path. Once a path was chosen, there was no switching. Could a mage who wielded mana also master martial arts? Certainly. There was no reason they couldn't wield a sword or spear if they were physically capable. However, they could never awaken their battle aura. Their very being was now attuned to mana. No matter how hard they trained, the energy they accumulated would always manifest as mana. The same principle applied to necromancy. A soul tainted dark could never go back to being pure. Well, technically, it can be cleansed. That is possible. The problem was that the cleansing process also erased memories and personality. The act of converting energy into power fundamentally reshaped the soul and body. This was why aura users, mages, and even clerics who dabbled in necromancy succumbed to corruption. They lost their original powers and even their personality would change, becoming different people altogether. For Karnak to truly start anew, he would have had to regress to a point before he ever learned necromancy. But that was impossible. The regression spell had to target a point in time where the caster possessed the commonality of necromancy. Therefore, he could only regress to a point after he had learned it. But you were able to return to a time before becoming a Death Knight because you were acting as a stowaway on me, Barros. Karnak had been aware of this limitation since his time as the Monarch of Death. So early on, he had devised a workaround, a way to make a fresh start after his regression. And this is the culmination of my efforts, he declared, gesturing to the flame dancing on his fingertip. I call it chaos power. Barros looked at the flame with newfound respect. Chaos power, it's impressive. Karnak smiled, a sense of satisfaction evident in his demeanor. This is just the beginning. There's much more to discover, and I plan to explore every possibility. With that, Karnak returned to his meditation, the soft glow of the chaos power illuminating the room. As he focused on perfecting his new abilities, the future of House Zestrad seemed brighter than ever. And so, amidst the trials and tribulations, Karnak's journey continued, one step closer to mastering the forces of chaos and securing his place in the world. Chapter 14, Omen of Annihilation. Necromancers. Those delightful individuals that everyone loves to hate. Why, you ask? Well, They did stuff no self-respecting person should. It's like they had a subscription to the How to Be a Terrible Person magazine, but with extra necrotic flair. So these necromancers had to be sneaky. Out in the open, they threw around spells that looked like your grandma's knitting spells. Nothing to see here, folks. But behind closed doors? Oh, that's where the real magic happened. Evil magic. Think of it like an evil magic rave where everyone's in costume, but the only costume is darkness and death. But here's the kicker. Despite their best efforts to hide, priests and the perceptive folks always sniffed them out. Why? Because necrotic power is like that annoying smell that follows you no matter where you go. It's made from all the bad vibes, death, resentment, and those awkward family dinners. Even Karnak, the heavyweight champion of necromancers, couldn't find a way to scrub the stench of necromancy clean. It's like asking decay to stop smelling. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. But Karnak had a brilliant and slightly twisted idea. Hey, what if necrotic power could be fermented? Like turning a sour lemon into a fine wine? So he put on his mad scientist hat, and after decades of research and a couple of oops, exploded moments, he figured out how to turn his filthy power into something that didn't scream, "I'm evil." He proudly announced, "Behold my new chaos power. It's like mana, but with a bit of a dark twist." It was like comparing a cheap beer to a high-end whiskey. Both can get you drunk, but one comes with a fancier label. Barros, ever the straight shooter, asked, "So you're telling me you've made your dark magic into fine wine?" To which Karnak responded, "Not quite, but close enough. I like to think of it as magic with a touch of class." "Why chaos power, though?" Barros wondered. "Why not call it something more fermenty?" Karnak rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. Names are important. Look at necromancy. It sounds way more ominous than dark magic. And besides, fermentation power just doesn't have the right flair." Barros wasn't convinced, but shrugged. If his master wanted to call it chaos power, who was he to argue? Fast forward to 6 months later. Both Karnak and Barros were settling into their new roles. Barros was on a quest for knightly perfection, while Karnak was busy perfecting his new magical brew. Barros had become quite the beefcake, muscles on top of muscles, and he'd sworn off junk food for a bit. He thought, maybe just one more beer, but no, must resist. Meanwhile, Karnak was getting comfy in his role as a mage. He'd discovered a magical relic that supposedly came from a court mage from 150 years ago. Karnak claimed he'd found it during training, but Barros wasn't buying it. He knew Karnak was more likely to have obtained it through less than ethical means. "Who was this Dallas guy anyway?" Barros asked, his curiosity piqued. "Oh, he was a real mage, all right. I got the relic from him, sort of," Karnak said, casually. He was actually a lich now, but let's not get bogged down by details. In reality, Karnak had tapped into the memories of a mage who'd long since become an archlich, making his power seem like it had a prestigious pedigree. "Sounds like a solid plan for pretending to be a mage," Karnak chuckled. "But I have no intention of conquering the world, just enough power to keep things running smoothly." Barros, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "Sounds like a plan. Let's keep a low profile and avoid any world-saving dramas." Karnak's new motto was clear: live quietly and stay out of trouble. But as fate would have it, he'd be tested sooner than he'd like. Barros was wrapping up his daily routine, still sweating from his intense training session. As he guzzled down a cold beer, he sighed in satisfaction. "Ah, this is the life." He'd certainly earned that drink. The maids in the mansion couldn't help but swoon at the sight of him. No longer the gangly youth, but a well-defined, muscular specimen who could make anyone's heart skip a beat. His transformation was nothing short of inspirational, at least to those who admired his dedication to self-improvement. Barros's thoughts were filled with the simple pleasures of life. Another beer might be nice, he mused, only to remind himself, no, health is important. Maybe just one more after this. Meanwhile, back in the Lord's office, Karnak was hard at work on his chaos power training. He had recently received a snack delivery from Barros, who seemed to have a dual purpose for his trip, bringing snacks and helping himself to a few. "Snacks are here, young master," Barros announced, placing the tray on the table with the precision of a practiced snack thief. Karnak waved him in. "Help yourself." Barros immediately dove into the pastries like a kid in a candy store. "Half of these are mine, right?" he asked, eyeing the tray with greedy anticipation. "Sure, why not? Karnak said with a smirk. It's not like we're on a diet. As they munched away, Karnak couldn't resist making a comment. Ah, these pastries are divine. We could use more, don't you think? Barros, ever the voice of reason, interjected. You'll get fat. Karnak scoffed. I have a fast metabolism. That's exactly the problem. Fast metabolism just means you'll end up with a beer belly faster. Barros shot back, his eyes twinkling with humor. The two laughed, but they knew all too well that those innocent indulgences could add up. Karnak had seen it before. An extra pastry here, an extra drink there, and before you knew it, your body was staging a rebellion. Reluctantly, Karnak gave in. All right, we'll leave it at this. Barros cleared the table and then asked, How's the magic training going? I'm almost ready to go public as a mage. It's going to be great, Karnak declared with enthusiasm. He'd made it sound like he was gearing up for a grand debut, but the reality was a bit less glamorous. In truth, Karnak had stumbled upon an old magic text he'd used to bolster his skills. He told Barros a convincing tale about finding it during his training. The book was supposedly from a famous court mage from 150 years ago, but Barros was skeptical. Are you sure this Dallas guy was real? Barros inquired. Oh, absolutely. He was a famous mage. I just borrowed his name because it sounded good, Karnak explained. Besides, Dallas was an archlich now, so he's not going to come back and haunt me about it. Barros raised an eyebrow. So you stole it from an archlich? Karnak chuckled. I wouldn't say stole, more like appropriated with extreme prejudice. As they chatted, Karnak revealed that his magical knowledge came from extracting memories from the archlich Dallas, a process that wasn't exactly conventional. But it was all for the greater good of looking like a legitimate mage. I'm not aiming for world domination, Karnak said, waving his hand dismissively. Just enough power to keep things running smoothly. Barros nodded in agreement. Sounds reasonable. Let's keep a low profile and avoid any grand adventures. Karnak's resolve was strong. Live quietly and stay out of trouble. But as the universe loves irony, his peaceful plans were about to be turned upside down in just a few months. And thus, the chapter closed with Karnak and Barros ready to face whatever life threw their way, as long as it didn't involve any conveniently catastrophic events. Chapter 15, Omen of Annihilation, 3. The Tekis Trading Company ran the Zestrad Territory's copper mine like a well-oiled machine. These guys were like the Wolf of Wall Street, but with more pickaxes and fewer yachts. Of course, Baron Zestrad didn't just sit back sipping wine while the money rolled in. Nah, his territory wasn't that lucky. Nestled deep in the northern Jedden mountain range, this copper mine had more demonic beasts roaming around than a cheap Halloween haunted house. And guess who had to play security detail for the miners? You guessed it, House Zestrad, the ultimate bouncers for miners. Not too far from the mine, in a dense forest, 10 brave, or stupid depending on how you look at it, soldiers were in the middle of a battle they didn't exactly sign up for. Here they come, one soldier yelled, probably rethinking his career choices. Hold the line, another barked, the desperation in his voice saying he didn't really believe his own order. The enemies? A bunch of demonic wolves called Snerals. Think wolves, but on steroids with a side of venomous fangs and claws. Not exactly something you'd want to take home to meet the family. Oh! The Snerals howled like they were auditioning for some demonic boy band, and the soldiers clenched their shields tighter than someone holding onto the last slice of pizza. Hold! Thrust your spears! There was the clang of metal, the scrape of claws on shields, and the occasional scream of, I think I wet myself. But amidst all this, spearheads flashed, drawing first blood from the Snerals. Got one, a soldier cheered, probably too soon, because no one likes a premature celebration. Stay sharp, there are still plenty left, another soldier barked. Meanwhile, Barros was standing off to the side, just chillin', like he was watching a casual sparring match. Wow, they're all fighting pretty well, he mused. Yeah, no kidding, Barros. Nothing says fighting well like trying not to get turned into wolf chow. See, Snerals weren't stronger than regular wolves, but they came with a little party trick. Poisonous fangs and claws. One scratch and you'd be paralyzed faster than a guy trying to explain to his girlfriend why he forgot their anniversary. We used to lose so many men to a single pack of Snerals, Barros thought, probably remembering the days when they had worse gear than a medieval discount bin. But things had changed. With the mine bringing in cash, the soldiers were now decked out in gear that'd make even a cosplayer jealous. They weren't terrified of these venomous furballs anymore. Die, you monstrous beasts! Come on, you mutts! We don't have to worry about getting bitten anymore. But just as one soldier was getting a little too cocky, another chimed in with, "No, we still can't get bitten. Their fangs can pierce through armor if they get a good chomp in." Way to kill the mood, guy. Barrows chuckled at their banter. But before he could start handing out snacks for their efforts, one soldier screamed, "Sir Barrows!" as a Snarl charged right at him. Now, you'd think Barrows might panic, but nah, this guy's too cool for that. In the blink of an eye, the Snarl's head was flying through the air like a bad CGI effect. The soldiers just stood there, jaws on the floor. What? Did we just see that? Their confused faces said it all. Barrows, not one to bask in glory, calmly wiped the blood off his sword and gave a polite nod. That was close. Thanks, Mr. Giramun. Giramun, still trying to wrap his head around what just happened, stammered, Yes, please don't call me mister. You're a knight now. Speak comfortably, Sir Barrows." But Barrows, being the lovable dork he was, scratched his head with a sheepish grin. "It hasn't been long since I became a knight. How can I be disrespectful by talking to you so casually? That's even weirder." The soldiers, watching all of this unfold, couldn't help but be amazed. Is this really that rascal Barrows? The guy who used to get picked on in the barracks was now slicing and dicing like some sword-wielding prodigy. While the soldiers were still fangirling over Barrows, he casually cut down the rest of the Snirrals like it was just another day in the park. The last Snirral dropped, and the forest floor looked like a crime scene from a horror movie. "That takes care of them," Barrows said, as if he'd just finished a light workout. Meanwhile, the soldiers got busy cleaning up the aftermath, collecting fangs and claws because, hey, why not make a little side hustle out of it? Tolael, Barrows' deputy, walked up to him, wiping the sweat off his forehead. "Good work, Sir Barrows." Barrows, ever the humble knight, replied, "No, you all worked harder." Sure, Barrows, because standing there looking cool definitely took more effort. But Tolael wasn't done. He had a bone to pick, or rather, a concern to raise. I do have to say, it's a bit concerning. Snarls weren't this strong before. Barrows, ever the innocent bystander to life's weirdness, blinked. Is that so? Inside, though, he was like, how am I supposed to know? These things are basically mosquitoes to me now. But instead of dropping that little bombshell, he played it off. I'm not as experienced as you all, so I wouldn't know. Tolael nodded thoughtfully. You're just too strong, Sir Barrows. Barrows' smile was more like, yeah, I'm OP as hell, but let's not make it weird. Okay? But just as things were winding down, Tolael dropped the real bombshell. Do you think the rumors about the goddess's prophecy, about the world's annihilation, are true? Ah, the classic mood killer. The prophecy was no joke. The great goddesses had all come together for a little chat and basically told humanity, hey, enjoy it while it lasts, because soon it's all going to hell in a handbasket. Because, nothing says good times ahead like a prophecy that includes words like annihilation, darkness, and the king of death. The prophecy, grim as it was, wasn't just a random rumor. A few years back, it had sent shockwaves across all the religious orders, causing them to clutch their rosaries a little tighter. It went something like this. The void shall open its maw, spewing forth a destiny not meant to be. A darkness that erases the light, a death that will reap life. Cataclysm is nigh. Twisted beasts shall gain twisted power, and the dead shall rise again to walk the defiled earth. The king of death shall descend, washing the world in blood and tears. It shall be the end that signals annihilation. Yeah, that's about the point where everyone collectively went, oh shh. The religious leaders tried to keep this bad news on the down low at first, probably thinking, let's not ruin everyone's brunch plans with talk of the apocalypse. But soon, demonic beasts started crashing parties everywhere. Necromancers began popping up like bad acne. And ordinary people were suddenly wielding dark powers like they were in some edgy comic book. Eventually, the secret was out. The world was heading toward doom, and now everyone knew it. The religious orders publicly announced the prophecy and rallied people under the banner of, in the name of the goddess, fight against the impending apocalypse. kind of like an epic battle cry, if you ignore the "we're all screwed" undertone. Meanwhile, back at the Zestrad mansion, Barros and Karnak were knee-deep in philosophical thought. Karnak, in all his wisdom, had his serious face on. "What is this, young master? There was no such prophecy before, was there?" "Nope," Barros answered casually, like someone pointing out a glitch in the Matrix. Karnak's frown deepened. "So why does the past keep changing, like with the copper mine?" Now that was a head-scratcher. Barros had his suspicions, but not enough to point fingers. "It's not related to you, is it?" He was looking at Karnak like a parent suspects their kid ate the last cookie but doesn't have proof. The prophecy? The king of death? This whole apocalyptic spiel? It felt way too familiar. "This sounds exactly like what we did," Barrow said, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Karnak didn't exactly disagree. "Yeah, I can see why you'd think that, but the timeline doesn't add up." According to the goddesses, this prophecy had been declared a few years ago, long before they did their little time travel routine. Barros, still trying to wrap his brain around it, muttered, "It's roughly the same time the copper mine just poof appeared out of nowhere." Karnak raised an eyebrow. "Now that's a coincidence." Or not. In stories like this, coincidences usually end with fire, blood, and screaming. But before they could go all tinfoil hat about it, Karnak had another theory. "At least now we know why Sir Randolph's case was brushed aside so easily," he said. Turns out Randolph's little dabble with necromancy wasn't as unique as they'd thought. Over the past few years, knights, mages, and even nobles had started playing with forbidden magic like it was the latest trend. They must have just lumped his case in with the others, Karnak concluded. Lucky for us. Barros, though, wasn't about to let this slide. "Shouldn't we try to find out more? The world is ending." Karnak, ever the realist, shrugged. "What are we supposed to do? March up to the Church of the Seven Goddesses and say, 'Hey, we're time travelers, and we think your prophecy is a bit off. Care to explain?'" Yeah, that'd go over well. Barros slumped in defeat. Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. No one wants to be branded a lunatic, especially not in front of some ultra-powerful religious order. After a brief, awkward silence, Karnak tried to lighten the mood. "It'll probably be fine, right? I mean, the goddesses themselves gave us a warning to prepare. It's not like they'd throw us to the wolves without a plan." Barros, trying to be optimistic, nodded. "That's true. I mean, do you really think the world will just end like that?" He paused. "You only succeeded in your whole end of the world thing because you took your time and built up power, young master. It wasn't some one and done deal." Karnak chuckled, remembering the good old days of world domination. "Yeah, and even then, it wasn't easy. We had to go up against some pretty tough opponents. The three wise archmages, the four great martial kings, Dragon Emperor Grateria." The two of them shared a nostalgic grin. World ending was hard work. "They'll figure it out, right?" Barros asked, a hint of doubt creeping in. "There's no way this new king of death is as ruthless as you were." "Of course not," Karnak replied with a wink. "He's got nothing on me." That was their grand conclusion. Let's just have faith in the world's potential. Surely, with the great forces of humans, dragons, and fairies, someone would figure out how to stop the apocalypse. They'd overcome the cataclysm, right? Still, there was that tiny voice in the back of their minds, nagging at them. "Man, this is making me nervous. I have a bad feeling about ignoring this." No matter how deep one buries their head in the sand, the apocalypse has a way of catching up with you. Even in a remote place like the Zestrad barony, whispers of annihilation still reached them. About a month after the rumors spread, clerics from the Order of Rachel, like actual messengers of the goddess, showed up at Baron Karnak's doorstep. "We've received reports that a necromancer operating in the Chad County has fled to your territory. We believe he's hiding somewhere in the Jedden mountain range, and we'd appreciate Baron Karnak's cooperation," the lead cleric said, all official-like. Karnak, not one to miss out on an opportunity, immediately agreed. "How could I refuse the holy work of the goddess?" Translation: time to score some serious brownie points with the order. All the clerics wanted was a few local guides who knew the area well. Karnak happily obliged. It was a small price to pay, and there was no downside. But Karnak's mind was elsewhere. This is perfect. If I get my hands on that necromancer, I might uncover some useful clues. And so the stage was set, with prophecies of doom looming large, necromancers lurking in the shadows, and our beloved knights trying to navigate it all without losing their heads. Stay tuned for the next thrilling installment.
And there you have it. The twists keep coming, and the chaos only grows. What's next for our monarch? Stick around to find out in the next chapters. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, because you won't want to miss what's coming up next.